This episode of The Ride is sponsored by ADM.
Gastric Support Just Easy. Forage First GS by ADM helps provide gastric support for horses of all ages and performance levels.
Performance horses today have high energy requirements and face many stressors, including exercise, hauling, and stall confinement.
An estimated 90% of performance horses face stomach discomfort caused by gastric distress, which can negatively affect their performance, attitude, and overall health.
The unique triple action blend of ingredients in ADM's Forage First GS supplement helps support a healthy gastric pH while protecting and strengthening the stomach lining,
helping keep your horse happy and performing at its best. Forage First GS, gastric support for the one you love most.
Learn more and find your dealer at admequine.com.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of The Ride. This is Nicole.
And this is Jillian.
And today our podcast is going to be interviewing Jacob Berry. Before we kind of talk about Jake a little bit, just wanted to make a note that in this interview, Michaela is actually interviewing him with me. This was pre-recorded, so while Jillian is here doing the introduction with me, she was not part of the interview. It was still Michaela, so we just wanted to give everybody a heads up on that. But Jake is a really fun guy. I got to meet him in March when I took a couple horses down to Arizona. My friend has some of her family has some of their young horses in training with Jake, and he trains out of the same facility as Brad Barkemeyer, who is obviously a horse and rider on demand expert and a longtime contributor to the magazine. So I've had the joy of hanging out with Jake and kind of getting, riding advice from him. He was on the cover of our summer issue. So by now, anybody who buys the magazine should have that issue in hand. So we also did a feature with him on how many days is enough. Jake is a really well-known colt starter. He breaks out young horses for some of the top cow horse reining cutting guys in the country. And he's a busy guy. So he also shows in the cow horse, but a majority of his business is working with really young horses, which I think is super important because we talk about the importance of foundation, letting a horse kind of figure out what they're doing, not putting too much pressure on them, understanding that their bodies are growing and changing and they might not be collected, they might not know how to carry themselves, like just kind of really understanding what the horse is needing from you as a trainer. But the article is great because, I don't think a lot of people realize when they send a young horse to a colt starter or a trainer, there's so much that goes into, preparing your horse for the fundamentals for whatever event that you plan on competing in. And it's not just throwing a saddle on him and riding. He talks about the importance of groundwork, teaching your horse, what you want out of him on the ground before getting on, starting in a round pen before graduating to the arena. We talk about, he takes all of his horses into the desert because he wants to get them acclimated to different atmospheres and not just be in the show pen, dragging a log, just desensitizing them to the world around them. So Jake is a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this interview. I know, Jillian, you probably don't know much about Jake outside of what you've heard from the interview and read in the magazine, but I'm super excited for this interview. But anyway, before we kind of dive into that interview, Jillian, what's going on in your world? I know that you are now at the APHA World Show. You just left the Pinto World Show not too long ago, so you're kind of bouncing around the country.
I am, yeah. So we left Tulsa a few days ago, and it's about a 5-hour drive. So we came over. Now we're in Fort Worth. So the APHA World Show is off to a good start. We're about halfway through, I think. So one cool thing that's going on here is the IEA Western Nationals is going to be hosted in conjunction with the World Show. So it'll be a good place. Like there'll be a lot of nice horses that they get to use that are already here at the World Show competing. And so that'll be fun. I'm going to kind of follow it and work with some of the riders and some of the coaches and get some insights. So I'm pretty excited about that. I think it'll be a good event.
Yeah, you mentioned, all the nice horses that are at the World Show that these kids get to use. The kids who are competing in this are using donated horses. So a lot of the people that are currently competing at the World Show are donating their horses for this particular event. And I think, as Jillian also has experience doing the collegiate team stuff. She did the IHSA, I did the NCAA. But a lot of those horses that we get stuck riding are never like, some of them, don't get me wrong, there are a few that I will always remember and they were fantastic horses and, they just had tiny little quirks about them, which is why they were donated. But, for the most part, there's a reason that these horses get donated. So you are stuck riding horses that are complicated and require patience and understanding. And you learn a lot on these horses. Sometimes it's really fun to just get on a really nice show horse and be able to do those maneuvers at a high level of difficulty. So these kids are so lucky. They're riding some of the top paint horses in the country and, they're getting to go to the World Show and compete in this special event. So I'm excited to see how it goes.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be really fun to watch. So
another thing that just went on was the NRHA Derby. I'm so excited. Trevor Dare won on this horse. His nickname is Hercules, and this horse is a crazy stopper. I mean, I've never seen a horse stop like him before. I am obsessed. I've known Trevor for a very long time. We both grew up in the Midwest, showing on the quarter horse circuit together. At one point, he did the all around. He's actually like a reserve world champion in the horsemanship. So before his reigning career started. But anyways, it was really exciting to see, somebody that I grew up with doing well. Hopefully we'll have him on the podcast. I'll have to reach out to him and see if he wants to do it. But we've done stuff with him for the magazine. So if you haven't read the articles that we've done with Trevor, go to the website, check them out. Maybe you can get a couple tips from the newest NRHA Derby winner.
We were driving past Oklahoma City and we saw like the signs for the Derby on the way from Tulsa to Texas. And I was like, oh, can we just like pull in there, make a little side stop for a minute? But but that was exciting. He crushed it.
Yeah, the Derby is such a fun event. It's one of my favorite events to go to. I was the managing editor of the NRHA Rainer for a while, a little bit. And so I always got to go to these big events to cover it and write about it. And I tell you, I love the Derby and I love the fraternity. There's just such a cool atmosphere about it. And that arena gets so loud during the finals.
I bet. Yeah, I can't imagine the atmosphere in there. It's probably so much fun.
So anyway, kind of going off that, let's kick off this interview.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Ride. This episode, we are joined with Jacob Berry, who is a professional colt starter, and we heard about him through our friends, the Toytons, who Nicole rides with and I ride with. And so anyway, we started to work with Jacob, and we really loved all of the things that he's doing. So hi, Jacob, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, so we really like to just start at the beginning here and figure out where your horse journey started. I know I'm kind of familiar with it, but let our listeners know where it all began.
My grandfather owned quarter horse race horses, and it started me down a rough road in the horse industry. No matter how hard I tried to get away from it, it kept pulling me back. Kind of was just a no offense to the rodeo cowboys out there, but I was just kind of a dumb rodeo cowboy through my college years, and then kind of needed some side money and started working for some horse trainers on the side, and then it's all history after that. So
yeah, I know one of my favorite things that you told me in one of our conversations is like the fact that you had a steer wrestling horse that was also a calf roping horse. And coming from a rodeo background, I'm like, that is just so impressive.
well, I was able to keep her pretty good by one box meant one thing, the other side meant the other thing. And I wasn't able to lope her much. I had to pony her with my head horse, but other than that, she was pretty good. She was ex-race horse a little wild, but yeah, it worked.
So you said you got your start in the racing with your grandfather being in the quarter horse racing. What were you doing there? Were you helping at the barn? Were you riding?
I was pretty young. Some of my older cousins got a lot more opportunity to learn and kind of grow. It's just like a little kid being around the barn. I picked stalls, did this. Got to help later on with a few of the, colts that he was bringing up, but I kind of caught him at the end of the career. But it's kind of like one of those things, your grandpa did it and you aspire to, he was like a father to me more than a grandfather. I spent a lot of time with him as a young kid. And so, yeah.
That's really cool though. I mean, you're obviously a generational rider. Your family goes back several generations with the horses. So that's really cool that you're able to kind of continue that tradition and be in that industry. I know my great grandfather was a horse trainer and my grandfather was a farmer. And so it's cool to know that the generations before you were doing, loving the same thing with the horses and riding. And, now you're competing, you're doing the cow horse stuff, the performance horse stuff, and doing quite well, I might add. So yeah, it's just a really neat start.
Yeah, thanks. And my whole family, they're still into horses. My aunt and uncle, they race horses. My cousins, she's like a sister to me, she races horses still. They raise them. They do really good. My aunt and uncle, they kick butt in the quarter horse racing deal. And the last couple of years, they've had like the high money earning quarter horse like filly or stud of the year. Won over a couple 100,000, and so.
Well, you say they're kicking butt over there, but you're kicking some butt in the show pen. So do you want to talk about, some of the things that you're doing in the show pen and like what drew you to the cow horse specifically?
Yeah. So when I first, out of college, I went to work for a horse trainer and actually doing rope horses. And he also did cow horses. His name's Jay Holmes. He's down in Sarasota, Florida. And after I kind of just got a little taste of the cow horse, I just saw the horsemanship involved, and always aspired to, have the better horse than the next guy. Cause I kind of come from, even though my family had horses, I always had the rejects. I had the horses a guy had to work on, or, you had to make it yourself. So I was always looking for the next best thing. And I kind of got into the cow horse that way. And I ended up working for Smokey Pritchett. He's a cow horse Hall of Famer for 5 years. And then I worked for Corey Cushing, he's kind of the man. His name coincides with cow horse, no matter what you talk about. I worked for him for 4 years, and I've been on my own for a couple years, but I've got some really good customers. I acquired a little colt. He was home raised here in Arizona by a veterinarian, and her name's Dia Hessian. He's a Kit Kat Sugar out of a really good Shiner mare that won a couple world titles in the cow horse. And I just lucky to have a good horse, and I made the open finals at the Snaffle Bit last year. And I just got home this weekend from a little derby in Paso Robles and made the open finals on him there, and was reserving the intermediate. And we nicknamed him Beer Money because he always pulls off a little cash everywhere he goes. So he's been a lot of fun.
That's a really good name. So you said you worked for like all these big time cow horse people, most recently before you went on your own, Corey Cushing. Yeah, like you said, he's definitely the name, that goes with the cow horse right now. What did you learn from him? And when did you kind of realize like, this is the time that I should start and go out on my own and continue my career as, your own business essentially?
So, I started with Smokey, and it was funny because Smokey taught me a ton. And I know you asked a question about Corey, but Smokey taught me like all my foundation. And it was a rough 5 years. I knew how to ride and I had horsemanship and I understood cattle from roping and stuff, but Smokey trained cutters and cow horses. And, he, bless his heart, he probably was more patient with me than some people, would have been, but he, he really got me a good foundation on just simple stuff, just basic feel and just how to get around some wild horses and this and that. And everybody asked me when I moved to Corey's, like, oh, it's got to be so much different. It's so much different because Smokey's a little more old school. Corey's got that new look and style. And honestly, it wasn't any different. Maybe just the thought process behind the same maneuver, like just changing the feel of it a little bit, or just maybe how you think about something, but everything stayed the same. And a lot of people don't get that. I mean, at the end of the day, there's only one way to go left and only one way to go right. And if you pull on the reins, they got to stop. It's just, but Corey kind of polished me up and gave me a lot of confidence. And, even when I went out on my own, I wasn't sure about it. It wasn't until the second year I was on my own, I was like, oh yeah, this is a great thing. It's always skeptical. And, I'd advise anybody who's wanting to do it. Like I put 9 years as an assistant, and that gave me a ton of confidence when I did get out on my own. Cause if I have problems, I feel like I have an answer. I got an answer in my toolbox to solve it. I can pull out that hammer or that wrench and all right, let's go to work and fix it like this. And it's, I have a lot of friends that maybe didn't work for somebody as long. And I'm constantly getting phone calls on, hey, what do I do here? What do I do here? And it's like, really? You don't know how to fix that? So, but I'd really recommend anybody to stick it out if you could.
I think that's huge because so many young, people who are just getting into the horse industry as professionals. They just want to get out on their own and they want to start winning and they want to have the best horses. And, unfortunately, that's not normally the path that happens unless you maybe come from a family who's really well known and is able to provide you with that, the horses and the clients and all that. But that's not very normal. And I think it's so true that you have to go and work for somebody to really truly understand all of it. And even, not even just the horse training side of things, but the business side of things, learning how they're able to run a business and keep it going. And, there's so much that goes into horse training and only one small part of it is the actual horse training.
Yeah, and the do's and don'ts, like you learn what you really like and then maybe what doesn't fit you. And one thing I feel like I really took away from Corey is presentation. Like I feel like when I show up with my horses, like they stand above a lot of people's because they're slicked off, they're fat, they're pretty, and they're presentable in the show pen. They stand out. And coming working for them guys as long as I did, also I got a good reputation. And so when I did start out on my own, I started with nice horses. People saw the good job I did for, I worked for DT Horses for a little while right after Corey's starting some colts that Kelby Phillips ended up showing. He did really good on them colts I started. And then Corey had done really good on them colts I started. And Smokey had done really good on them colts I started. And everybody saw me at the shows putting in really hard work. I mean, I'd go above and beyond every stall, and the front of the stalls, the concrete was immaculate. I'd spray it off, tending the tack rooms and stuff. So people see that and, they recognize that and they keep an eye on you and, see where your show career is going. And when you do get on your own, they really put a lot of faith in you. So.
Yeah, I know Nicole and I actually talk about presentation a lot. We're like, we both came from an all-around background and showing horses, and we're like, presentation is huge. And sometimes we'll go places and it's like, oh, wow, that's kind of lacking or things like that. So we totally understand how important it is. And actually, I think I'll let Nicole talk about it, but she was actually going to write about how, somebody saw something in her that like, oh wow, you were willing to put in the work and the hard work and the hours and the time to make sure things looked good, and that translates over to your horses. And a lot of people see that, especially the professionals who are going to send you and clients who are going to send you horses.
Yeah, that's always been huge for me, because I came from the world of, you had the matching stall curtains and everybody had matching halters and everybody had matching blankets, and and then obviously in the all around, the outfit presentation's important, hat shape, all the fine details, clipping your horse and, blacking feet and all that stuff. Granted, I don't do all of that in the cow horse now. But it still translates over. I was cleaning my tack at like the small local level cow horse show, my first one. And everybody's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I don't know. Don't you guys clean the tack before you go in? Like, that's something I do. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm big on, like stall curtains, like Corey did them, and I think they're cool. Usually me being kind of up and comer, they put me in the back anyway. Nobody sees my stalls, so I I tend not to waste too much time with the curtains. And then we're going a little too fast probably for some hoof black, but I'm sure, clip them horses. I want them to be slick. I'm crazy about them being full. Like I always have a grass hay net hung in front of them show horses, just to where they always got food in front of them. They're never out. They always can free graze and be fat and happy. My grandpa used to say the prettiest color on a horse is fat. I think you can go overboard on that, but you just, when you walk into that show pen and that horse stands out, them guys are watching you. Them judges, they sit up, they start paying attention. If you come in and your horse looks sloppy, you're already starting off bad, and the owners are happy, and other people notice, and then pretty quick that sometimes snowballs into more horses, and it's always, and you'll get compliments going around the horse show like, man, your horses look great, so it stands out.
Well, you say it sometimes snowballs into more horses, but from our conversation, I don't think that's a problem or something that you need right now, because you have a ton of clients and a ton of horses that you are rolling out with. So we've talked about the cow horse, but how exactly did you worked under some of these Hall of Famers and stuff, but where did you go, okay, I don't want to train these show horses specifically, but like I want to start colts that can go into the reining, the cow horse, the cutting, the barrel racing, all of that sort of stuff?
It's kind of one of those things, as you're going through the motions, it's just supply and demand. All these guys are spending so much time hitting the road, and a lot of them got decent guys that stay at home and do a good job on the 2-year-olds. But just like me, I'm only an assistant so long, and then I go out on my own. And anymore, it just seems like the younger generation, there's just less and less people that want to spend the time to learn the craft, and so there's just a huge demand for a good 2-year-old guy that does a good job, and then not just does a good job, but realizes what it's going to take for that horse to be a good show horse, and implement that early, and just keep it simple and soft, and teach them their job in a good way, to where when them guys go to step them up as a 3-year-old, they come to the call and do a good job. So, I mean, I do like showing. I got a little burned out working for some, like, especially, no offense to Corey, I love him to death, he's like a brother, but boy, when we go to the horse show with 20 some horses, and there's a lot of schooling all night, showing all day, schooling all night, showing all day, trying to catch a nap here or there in between cleaning stalls and shampooing, and it just, I really enjoy the last couple of years. When I have gone to horse shows, I take 4, and it's like a vacation. I get away from some of my babies, but the babies, I really enjoy it. And you get to see that progress every day, where sometimes them show horses, you're just keeping it simple, keeping it, you're more so just going, no, wait on me, listen to this, kind of playing tricks on them, making sure they're not, jumping ahead of you, and then just go to the show and go as fast as you can, so. But the babies, you always see that progression day by day, and you're just like, man, that's a lot. It's just rewarding for me, just to you work real hard at it, and every day they get a little better, and you're like, man, this is great. You feel like you're doing something. So.
Well, I think that's huge too, because like you said, you actually have experience showing the cow horse, and you currently do show the cow horse, so you know what a finished product should be. I always get a little cringe when someone's like, "Oh, I just sent it to the bronc rider down the road," and again, no offense to the bronc riders, they are good at what they do. But when you're having a show horse, I think it's really important to put those foundations and fundamentals in early so that you're not having to go back and fix all those mistakes. And so that's huge to have somebody who knows both sides of it and can start a horse really well that can go on to be finished, whether it's with you or whether if it's for a client or Corey or whoever. And then I also totally get you on the burnt out showing thing, because I did that too, and a lot. And now I'm very appreciative of being a non-pro.
Yeah. Well, so this year, I think it was the 10th time I showed at the Snaffle Bit Futurity. And I've done good in the past too. I've always, just about every year I've won a check in one of the divisions at the Futurity and done well, except my first year. The first year was pretty rough. I think it is for everybody. You have expectations going in, and then you get in there and you're like, oh. And you're like, I was going so fast in the raining. And then you watch your video and you're barely pony loping, and you're just like, what happened? But I've always done well, but it seems like every year you come out from it and you're like, man, I'm missing, you got a missing link somewhere, and every horse is different. So they're always gonna, you're gonna have pieces you don't like, but it just seems like every year I got a little piece of the puzzle that I was like, I really thought I had that, and so I think that's, that really transfers to the 2-year-olds, and every year my 2-year-olds get a little bit, I don't know, I'd say probably less complicated. I think the 2-year-old guys they're so worried about little things that really don't even exist. It's little feel things that I got to have my horse feeling like this, and I got to have it doing this. And sometimes if you just smooth it out and let it be simple, then the horses figure it out on their own. And it translates so much better in the show pen to where you don't have to twinkle your pinky finger and wiggle your butt cheek and tap your nose 3 times to get them to do a certain maneuver, So I don't know. That's the big thing I noticed different in my 2-year-olds just from showing. So
I don't know. I think that method of, tapping your nose 3 times sounds like a much more fun method. I don't know about you, but when I'm out in the show pen, that's exactly what I want to do.
For sure.
But we've talked about your horses and stuff, and how pretty much when you go to get on them, you like them to where, some kind of old man can probably go jump on them because they're so ready to take on that next step. And where did you develop that kind of philosophy where it's I want them to be, super broke before I even get on them and make them broke in that sense?
Well, I used to be the bronc rider down the street, and, I'm getting, it's turned into a career, and I have, I don't have a big family, but I have my wife and my dogs, and I pay for a house and pay for a truck. And, you start realizing, my income some people depend on it, and I do too. So, just being smart, and just going about it a better way, just taking your time, and I'm lucky. I have a lot of my horses for the year, so I can really take my time and do a good job. And if one takes a few weeks to get to where we can put a first ride on them, I'm okay with that. And just a better experience for that horse too, that first ride, you can walk off, and if they grab their butt a little bit, you can steer them around in a small circle and just get a hold of their feet again. And pretty quick, you're just jogging and loping. That's how that horse is going to be for the rest of his life, especially if you can do that for the first couple weeks. And pretty quick, you just get on and go, and they're completely happy and confident. And you're gonna iron out a lot of bad spots that maybe you would have had if you just, cowboyed up and just stuck it to them. So
I think that's a huge thing to say, because, just like people, all the horses that you ride are different, and their personalities are different, and their mental capacity to learn something is different. And if we already put a lot of pressure on these horses, especially in the cow horse, where we're wanting them at 3 years old, getting ready to do some pretty extremely athletic things. and to put so much pressure on them in that 2-year-old year, you're going to burn them out, you're going to stress them out, give them anxiety. It's great to hear that you kind of listen to the horse and kind of learn what they need for you to support them and help them.
And that's I think a lot of 2-year-old guys get focused in on, I got to have that colt doing what them guys are doing as 3-year-olds, and you don't. Like, I do a lot of, just for like the first 90 days, I do a lot of riding, just going places, just teaching them. You watch a lot of them guys and they get on and they're pulling them around, and they're first day, they're just trying to get them like, oh, you got to turn around, you got to stop. And they're just heaving and hoeing and trying to do too much. I just go forward. I got enough on them to where, I do teach him to step around a little bit, and I want him to come back to a stop, and I trot circles. But there, for the first little while, it's just go places comfortably and confidently, and just be comfortable with me up there. And, usually by the time somebody else gets them at the end of the 2-year-old year, they're working a cow really good, and they just do kind of basic rein work. They lope around nice. I've probably run and stopped them a little bit, but not very much. They have a really nice turnaround, and they walk, trot, and lope circles. I mean, and they've been out in the desert and rope swung on them, and that's about it. But I've spent a lot of time doing all that stuff to where they're just super confident, to where when them guys get them, they can put all their own feel on them.
So, kind of not going back, but just kind of in general, was there, and this could have been when you were working for, people, or when you're out on your own, is there a horse that kind of changed your riding philosophy, or a horse that kind of stood out to you that really kind of helped you become the horse trainer that you are?
I wouldn't say there's any one horse. I showed a lot of, and no offense to any owners out there or anything, I showed a lot of junk. Like, I would always get the bottom of the bottom pick, being the assistant, and everyone taught me a ton. And I got to where I'd go in there, and then like people would be like, "That's a great horse." I'm like, "You guys have no idea. Like, this thing is like, you should have seen the struggles we had all year." And just learning how to adapt, and like, even though your work's might not be good, learning how to get around that horse, and like, it's going to pull on you here, lean on you here, and just learning how to show around it, and making it look presentable in the show pen. And I know that it would be hard to put maybe a non-pro or an amateur on one of those horses and get the same result, but still learning how to just put them together. And a lot of times, just like I said a little bit ago, like, making stuff more simple on those ones to where a non-pro or an amateur could get along with them, and the little horse I showed this last year and did really good on, that Celtic Cat, he did let me take it to the next level, which, I was right on the cusp of, and I knew how. I've marked big before, but that's one of the first horses I could go do 3 events and mark big on, so he taught me a little bit how to maybe tee off on them guys a little bit more, but that's no specifics really, just a lot of just learning as you go, and learn how to figure out those maybe not as big time horses. So
I think that the not so big time horses are really the horses that make a trainer, though, because I know that, like, as a kid, I showed some really, really nice horses, and then I went to college and I did the D1, NCAA stuff, and you're riding complete rejects, their anxiety's off the roof. They have, bad memories of the show pen, and you're just like getting on this horse for 4 minutes and then having to go show. And that changed my mindset a lot, and really, I don't know, it humbled me. I was, a kid that came off of doing really well, and then I was having to ride these horses that, like, took a little bit of, skill to ride and actually go and show. And I credit those to being the reason why I think I'm the capable rider that I am today. And I credit those horses more than the really nice show horses that I won a lot of stuff on, because those are the ones that you had to actually learn and do stuff and get out of your comfort zone and, try something new.
Well, and then, yeah, I mean, I'm fully honest with my owners. Like I tell them, hey, this one, like this is what he is. And me going down that path of no matter what they are, still getting them broke, we either can get rid of them because they are broke, or a lot of times like they'll just want me to go through the motions with it, and see what we can make. And a lot of time, like I feel like so many guys strive for, and I do too, I want that next big time horse. I want a good horse. Like, don't get me wrong. Like if I'm going to go show one, especially as competitive as it is, I want a good one. I want one that I can go be competitive on. But you can keep a full barn doing a good job on average horses, and there's 90% of the horses out there are just horses, and so, I just always try to do a good job no matter what's presented to me. And, as long as I think a guy's honest and upfront with his owner and just not promising, oh yeah, we'll win the snaffle bit futurity on this one, or, being just upfront there, everybody's always happy with you when you do a good job. So.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing, because like you said, not all horses are superstars. Those superstars are actually far and few between. You have a lot of pretty average horses. I mean, that they can go and be shown and get the job done, but it's just they're not going to go out there and win every single big event. So being honest with those owners, I mean, they probably have a pretty good idea. They put a lot of time and effort into the breeding and getting that horse to where it is, but every owner has to know that not every horse that comes out of their barn is going to be a superstar, no matter who you send it to, whether it's you or somebody else or the saddle bronc rider down the street. It still kind of, it'll have a better opportunity in your hands, taking the time and being in a performance atmosphere. But, it just comes down to the athletic ability of the horse and the horse's mindset and willing to do it.
Yeah, and that's just it. And like a lot of like, just like you said, they got a lot of time and effort into the breeding. And, a lot of them people don't like to hear, well, this horse ain't going to make it. It ain't no good, and like, you got to be honest with them. But I feel like there's been a lot of times where I have showed up at the futurity with one and, I might've not just I won a little bit here or there on it, but I presented their horse in a really good way, and it does cost a lot of money to go to those things. And I try to steer them maybe towards some of the smaller shows that doesn't have as much as the competition and we have a little bit better chance at. And, just most of the time they're just super tickled that their horse was presented in a good way. And man, I know you didn't quite get it, but boy, it looked good, and they're super happy about something like that. And it's just, you just got to feel out your customer and, see what they're up for and what they're not up for. And like I said, just upfront and honest. And that's about, without, I feel like there's always a better way than just going, oh, that's a piece of crap, or, don't waste your time on it. And there's there are some, very few and far between. There's been a couple over the years. I'm like, we got to get rid of this thing. This is a really bad horse, and usually try to find a way out of it. But very seldom is that the case. If a guy spends a little time and effort, you can usually get through it and make it a decent animal. So.
Well, and it might not be the world's best cow horse, it might not win the snaffle bit, but it'll be a really good horse for somebody. Whether it's just a riding around horse, a ranch horse, or, taking it into a new event. Like the ranch riding is huge now, or the ranch versatility. A lot of those cow horses that have a really good foundation that didn't necessarily make it as, a cow horse in the NRCHA end up going and doing really well in those events. So I think it's great to, you don't want to just give up on a horse because it's not going to be the next snaffle bit winner, but, find what it will be good at.
Well, and that's, especially with that, like the new rope horse futurities that are throwing so much money at it. A big percentage of them horses are ex-snaffle bidders, and they've gone through that whole program of, like hauling to a few futurities and having to step up and getting shown and being at the show. they're having all that experience, and now they're a rope horse, which is, in my mind, it's a little easier task, and so if you're competing against, maybe say you just kind of started, you barely got your horse 90 days and started roping a dummy on it instead of going through the whole cow horse program, it's going to be really hard to compete against, one of them horses that went down just even if it didn't do good, it went down the show trail and that thing's way more of a finished horse than something that maybe just went to the roping pen, or just like you said, or the ranch riding. That's a step down from what we do. So it just, you can kind of take them horses and go any direction, especially if they've been through the whole snaffle bit process. And
yeah, that's what I know that we've talked about barrel racing before too, is the fact that a lot of those barrel racers really like the cow horse background and those sorts of things, because they can take them and they're like, wow, this thing's actually really bro. Not at all what I was expecting to get out of my program.
I do. I keep my barn full with some gals that run the barrel fraternities, and it's funny when they try one of, I every now and then, about seems like 2 or 3 horses a year kind of end up being a reject that just maybe don't have a very good stop or no cow or something, and I'll tend to lean towards like my team roper friends or my barrel fraternity gals and try to sell them that way. And it's funny watching them ride them. Them horses have a lot of rate, and they're real unsure about, they're not running off loping around, and they're not sure how to handle that sometimes. I don't know if he'll be fast enough. I'm like, he'll be fast enough, but they like how they operate, and they always love how soft they are, and how they're just simple. They steer left, they go left, they steer right, they go right. So
Yeah, they have control. They're fast, but in a controlled way.
yeah, and like I spend a lot of time with the cow horses teaching body position, and I don't work on their face being soft as much as I work on where their feet and their body are. And if their feet and their body are right, their face will get soft, and them. So they get on them and they start doing stuff with them. Well, their body doesn't really get out of whack, or their feet don't get out of whack, and they're not running around that barrel and, just wiping out that butt around that barrel, or, they go to ask them to stop and they stop, and they're really impressed all the time by it. So,
well, going, kind of off that, what would you kind of talked a little bit about like working for people, before going out on your own. What is some other advice to somebody who might be looking to maybe get into the colt starting, maybe get into the performance horse kind of thing? Like, what would your advice be to somebody who was maybe in your shoes when you first started?
Listen, don't think you know everything. I still go next door and get help from Corey. I bounce some stuff off Andrea when I see him. I bounce stuff off guys I respect and revere as great horse trainers. I got my lifelines. Just always listen. Always don't be afraid of trying something just because it doesn't fit what you know or you do. Just listen, keep an open mind, don't talk back. Basic principles like that your dad and mother teach you, I guess. And the biggest thing I think, to keep it will destroy your confidence every day if you let it. Like even me, I feel like I'm really good at the 2-year-olds. It's very easy for me. I worked really hard to make it easy. It didn't come by me naturally. I rode a pile of, I don't even know how many, thousands and thousands of 2-year-olds now, and I've you develop a feel where you can feel stuff coming. You can anticipate it. You know what, this horse has this feel, it's going to do this. This horse has this feel, and I've rode so many different kinds of horses too. I just kind of blend it into one. But the biggest thing is just I tell myself every day, low expectations. I have high hopes going in, but I'm not going to expect that horse to be 100% every day, because if I do, I'm going to come home every day and be like, man, I should be a greeter at Walmart. I suck at this. they will let you down every day. At the end of the day, they're still animals, and I'm riding a bunch of animals that are in kindergarten, and it's like trying to herd cats. You just can't, you're not going to get it done how you want every day. And you just got to be okay with that. And I think a lot of people are just like, oh, I suck. And it's like, we all suck, you just gotta low expectations going in. You'll never get disappointed. I'm always trying to make them horses better, but at the end of the day, like, if they're not going to be good, like, I'm just going to work through it to the best of my ability, and we'll start off tomorrow fresh. So
Yeah, them being in kindergarten is like one of my favorite things that you say because it's so true. Because, you say, you don't send your kid off to school without knowing a whole lot. Same thing with your horse, give them a little bit of background, but yet they're also still little kids. And sometimes they get distracted, and sometimes they're slow learners, and all of those sorts of things. So, yeah, that's one of my favorite things. But of your group of kindergartners or first graders or, elementary students, the horses that you have showing this year, what do you have in your lineup?
I have just I have my one Derby horse. I had two. My good friend Will Pennebaker, he's out of California. Me and him share an owner. I had a Palomino named SJR Talk and Shine, and I was top 10 on him at the Reno Futurity last year. And then I just showed at that little Paso Robles Spring Classic Derby. It wasn't a little derby. There was a bunch of added money, and I mean all the big trainers were there: Justin Wright, Clayton Etzel, Todd Bergen, Nick Dowers. I mean, it was a tough crowd, but he ended up top 10 in the Open there and top 5 in the Intermediate. But I just lost him. He went to my friend Will Pennebaker, which he'll do a good job on him this year. So I just have that Celtic Cat for the derbies, and then I actually sold all my 3-year-olds. So I'm always in the business to, like, I like to show, but I always look out for my 2-year-old business. So, if guys are coming looking and I got good 3-year-olds or 2-year-olds, they're always for sale. I don't mind. At the end of the day, my bread and butter is a 2-year-old deal. I do have really nice little 3-year-old. That's a smooth talking style, and his mother is the mother to Stevie Ray Vaughan. So he's a nice colt. And then I have a Time for the Diamond that belonged to some friends of mine down here, and he's a nice colt. Those are the only 2 3-year-olds I have this year. And I mean, they're both nice. They're not my Celtic Cat, but they're both dang sure nice. And then just a whole pile of 2-year-olds, which I don't, I never know where they're going or where they're going to end up. I know kind of the destination of some of them, but not all of them. So I try to send them, if they want to be sent out to other destinations, I'm all about it. Cause once again, I'm a 2-year-old guy. I don't want, and I do start horses for trainers too. So I don't want to be that guy that's going to steal the trainer's horse, or, if someone wants to leave one with me and they don't have any concrete ties somewhere, I'm all about keeping them. But at the same time, like I'd love to see them go off to other destinations and do well in other barns, because it's just going to keep me in business. So
was the Palomino the one that's going to be on the cover? Oh, by the way, it's official. You're on the cover of the magazine.
Nice.
So,
Yeah.
was it that one?
That's the Palomino. Yeah, that's him.
Yes,
So.
by the way, to all of our listeners, Jacob's the one that's going to be on the cover for our summer issue. And then Michaela and him worked on a really cool feature about how many days is enough, and kind of breaks down what you can kind of a general idea of what you can expect your horse to be doing after so many days at the colt starter or your horse trainers. And so it was a really good piece. I'm excited for it. But no, I think you're the smart one, because I was just visiting you like a month ago, and you have a full barn of horses. You're on a different one every time I saw you. And you don't have to go to all the horse shows all the time. You get to stay home. So I think you're the smart one out of the group.
Well, that's a nice thing about having all the 2-year-olds is, a guy can still have a weekend. I love to bow hunt. So I get to take a little time here or there when I can. And the big thing about me not going to all the shows is them, the owners know their 2-year-olds are getting rode. And and I kind of, like I said earlier, I have a monopoly on it. There are other guys that do it, but not to bang my own chest or brag on myself, but there's only one me, and so I do get a ton of nice colts, and I have a list clear till next year of people on the list waiting, and that's really good feeling for a horse trainer. I know if one stall's empty, it's going to be full tomorrow, so to me, that's just good business practice. And I don't have all that overhead of just beating that road and buying new tires and keeping a big new trailer and truck. And, and then my career doesn't depend on me being great in the show pen every time I step in there, to where when I do do good, it's just icing on the cake. I get to have my cake and eat it too, and just have a good time with it.
Yeah, I was going to say, you actually get to enjoy the horse shows when you go do it, because it's not
they
every
still
weekend.
They still stress me out more than you
Well,
can
yeah. I also really like your philosophy of there's only one you, because I think that it's really important that people don't try to look up to others and be the next Corey or the next Andrea or whatever. Like, find what you're good at and do that, and be your own person. Don't try to follow in the footsteps of somebody else that's successful. I like that.
Yeah, and just, like, there's that fine line between confident and cocky, but like I think to be successful in the horse deal, you have to have confidence. You have to believe in yourself, and you have to believe that it's going to work. Like, and because especially in the show pen, the second you just hold back and maybe don't just go and run and stop that horse, or go for that fence turn, or whatever it may be, any discipline, if you're not relaying that body language to your horse, like, hey, this is what I want you to do, and like, let's do it with confidence, is the second you hold back or get tight, that horse doesn't function as good as it can, and you have to have confidence, and you have to exude it, and you have to just have that mindset, like, no matter what happens, this is going to work. Like, this is going to work. And I know that's probably like crazy voodoo stuff, but it does. Like, if you run one down there and you're like, we are going to run and stop, and this is going to work 99% of the time, it's going to work. It's especially on a good horse. And if you kind of hold back and second guess yourself, you might bounce out of the saddle and, see the city of Scottsdale under your butt or something, so you just got to go with it sometimes. And just overall in general, just be confident.
We actually just had a guy on the podcast, Gil, who he owns a company called Mental Athletics. He's a reiner that lives in Israel. And yeah, so like, we just did a whole podcast on, the mental side of it, being confident and kind of having a game plan and realizing what you're doing in the show pen, so that you aren't second guessing yourself and getting into trouble when you shouldn't. And so, no, I think that's all huge. And I think that's a really important part of horse showing that we like to forget. We get so caught up in what our horse is doing that we forget what we're doing.
Yeah. And that translates, I know this is kind of going off the spectrum maybe a little bit, but when you are in the show pen, it's gotta, it's better to look good and feel bad than feel good and look bad, and I think so many people are like, oh, this feels terrible. But just being able to retract yourself from the situation, and like, I constantly have somebody video me, especially before horse show, like, I just want to see what it looks like. Or, I've been around it enough now, I kind of know what it looks like, by the feel, especially on certain horses, and just oh, he's leaning his shoulder here, but you know what? If the judges probably can't see it if you just turn loose and let it go. Whereas if you're kind of picking on it and you got a tight rein a little bit, it looks like you don't trust that horse, and that kind of rolls into that confidence thing. But just learning how to get by and make it look good, even though it doesn't necessarily feel the best. And a lot of times that translates to 2-year-olds too. It might not feel very good, but if work on the function instead of the feel, work on, like, I want this horse to stop and turn with that cow. And so every time for me, like, no matter what it feels like or what happens, that horse has to stop and turn with that cow, so I'm going to work. To me, that function trumps the feel, like, and I'm going to keep working on the feel, but I'm not going to distract that horse and take them completely away from what's going on. Hey, this is your number one job, and we're going to keep making this better as we go. But a lot of times, if you just teach that function and just keep trying to put your form on it, it gets really good, and they have a ton of confidence with it. Whereas you're always like, no, that's not hot. That didn't feel right. That's not what I want. I want it better. I want it better. I want it better. You really take a lot of confidence out of them horses, and you don't get the end product as nice as you'd want it to be. And a lot of times you might have a really cool look, but then they just don't do it when you call on them.
Well, I think that's something that's really important for, our listeners to take home and, go with, is especially going back to the show pen. You got to keep showing. If something goes wrong and you just kind of hole up and try and fix it right there in the show pen, you're not really, helping yourself or your horse. If you just keep showing, you might make it somewhere. You might not, you might feel something that the judges don't see and just keep going with it. So I think that's really important for our listeners to take home, and then take home with the young horses, because they might be getting some young horses at home, and you worked with them and they know it, but then going home to somebody who isn't a professional trainer it's a different world for that horse, and trying to work through all of those obstacles is something that the riders have to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's a good example. This last weekend, showing my really good horse, Celtic Cat. I walked out of the reining going, man, that sucked. That sucked. And then the announcer come on and was like, Celtic Cat 223, and I was like, oh wow, So I knew it wasn't horrible, but it just didn't feel like the ground was a little heavy. And I know that horse is always going to stop. And we didn't feel like we went very far. And there was little spots that, and just like I took my own advice, and I just kept showing through it and just staying loose and just going somewhere, fast, and trying to make points where I could. And it's funny how you'll walk out and you're just shaking your head. And I don't shake my head walking out of that show pen. I don't want to let them guys know I didn't like it, but dang sure, I walk out of there and I looked at my wife and I'm like, man, was it good? That didn't, I knew it was decent, but she's like, yeah, it was great, and so it's one of those things it's funny, even as long as I've been around it still surprises you sometimes. So.
Yeah, I know. Even being a barrel racer, the same thing. I know I'm not being judged, but I come out and I was like, that was terrible. And then they announced my time, and I was like, are you sure about that? Because it did not. And then I watched the video, and I'm like, oh, the video looks just fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was flawless. But to
Yep.
me, it just felt like I was a monkey riding a football. So.
Yeah, that's I've had that feeling way too many times. So.
Meanwhile, I just don't know what I'm doing in the cow horse, so I just come out and I go, I don't know, was that good or not?
Well, you're getting better. It was looking good last time you were down here in Scottsdale, so don't be too hard on yourself.
Yes, when we fell over chasing the cow, circling at 10 miles an hour. Yes, very good.
And then that going back, that made me think of, like, you asked, like, what would be good advice for somebody coming into it. But don't be afraid to fail. You gotta remember, like, even the Corey Cushings and the Justin Wrights and the Bob Avalas, we've all fallen flat on our face. Like, I've gone in there and just been terrible. Just had nothing go in my favor. Nothing worked. The horse not really try. And I think there's a ton of people that just, they're afraid to go in that show pen, or they're afraid to do something with a young horse, and you are going to fail. Like, and it's like you hear them guys that are the big time batters for the MLB, like their success percentage is super low, and they get paid millions and millions and millions of dollars for it, and the horse trainers, we don't make millions and millions, but same thing. Like, you can have some really good horses and do good in the show pen, but at the same time, a lot of what we do is just, like, the horses fail, and then you just show them how to get out of it, and they fail, and you show them how to do it right, and they fail. Like, it's okay to fail. Like that's part of the training process and building a horse. And like, I feel like so many people try to make everything perfect, where I'd rather like let that horse fail, like not just fail miserably and get himself in a bad situation, but at the same time, let him make a mistake, and then, you know, maybe make it some work to get back to being right, to where, you know, like if he misses a cow, I might hustle him back over to that cow, and he misses a cow and I'm going to hustle him back. Well, pretty quick, he's going, oh, it's a lot easier just to stay right here and I don't have to hustle as hard, you know, and make them kind of be a little smarter, and help you help them, to where when you do get in the show pen, not only do you have them trained, but they're helping you along the way too, to where you're not having to do every little thing for them. So
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that it was kind of good to get that little fall out of the way when he slipped, because now I have it out of the way and I don't have to be afraid of, because that's like Monique and I always joke, and Monique hasn't had one fall on her circling and she's like, I'm so afraid of that. I don't want that to happen. And I'm just like, oh, I got it out of the way. Like, we're good now. We can just keep going. Like, it's fine.
well,
But
me, from personal experience, it doesn't hurt too bad. So as long as they don't come up over you and just slip and fall, usually the ground anywhere we go is pretty soft, and it kind of absorbs you a little bit. There at the Snaffle Bit Futurity Finals, I was sitting really good, and I fell down circling to be really good, you know, probably top 5. I was having a big fence work, and that was, I think that was almost harder than maybe just having a bad fence work, you know. Probably would have rather had a bad fence work than be so close to, you know, a good situation and then just right at the last second just fall down. So
yeah, I watched that run. It was really good. not to like, you know, remind you of it, but it was a really good run. And when I saw you fall, I was like, my heart dropped, because I was like, oh, he was having such a good run.
it took me a few days too. I told my wife, you know, I'm not upset and I'm not depressed, but I just feel really terrible. Like it was a weird feeling I had. And I don't know if it was just riding that high of making the, you know, the first year I come back and show on my own accord as my own person, you know, I make a horse to the open finals, and my non-pro makes a non-pro horse to the finals. And, you know, just riding that just great feeling of just success, and then just having it all come to a crashing end like that. And I was still happy, don't get me wrong, and excited for my friend Sarah Dawson for winning it, you know, but she fell the year before to win it. And maybe this year, maybe that same good luck will come back to me. I don't know.
I love it. Well, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you? Are you on social media? Do you have a website?
It's kind of sad. I do have an Instagram. It's I think it's at JB Colt Company. But I don't put a lot of time and effort into social media. I kind of am oblivious to the world around me. I'm busy enough guy. I just kind of, you know, try to.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I try to just. I don't know. I feel like people get so caught up in dumb stuff on social media that just it doesn't even really matter. You know, they get so absorbed in it, and I try to spend time with my family and spend time at my job. And, you know, I feel like I enjoy life a little bit more because I don't care about other people's stuff. So.
But if you want to see a really great picture of Jacob posing for the camera holding a chicken, you should check out his Instagram.
Yeah. And that's for Kimes Ranch, if I'm allowed to say that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and taking time out of your day to talk with us. We greatly appreciate it. And hopefully our readers listeners would learn a little bit more about you, and they check out the summer issue of the magazine where they can read about some of your training techniques.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Once again, we'd like to thank ADM for sponsoring this episode of The Ride. guys for tuning into the Ride Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and please be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow Horse and Rider Magazine on social media and find us at horseandrider.com.
If you guys have any questions or comments, please be sure to hit us up at horseandrider@equinenetwork.com. We want to hear from you guys.
And if you like what you're listening to, be sure to leave us a review on iTunes.